Now the MG Hector has always been a competent choice in the mid-size SUV segment. It's got great presence, quite a bit of space inside, and a long list of tech and features. But competition in this segment is now more intense than ever before, which is why you now have this, the MG Hector Facelift, the most significant update to this SUV yet. There haven't been any sheet metal changes as is usual for these midlife updates, but the facelifted Hector does look quite different from the front with this massive diamond pattern grille. It doesn't fully gel with the rest of the design, but if it's presence you want, the Hector now has you well and truly covered. The headlamp units remain the same, just in a new housing, while the bottom portion has been reworked for a more striking look to go with the rest of the design. The side profile remains identical with the 18-inch wheels that were introduced a couple of years ago. Then at the rear, the new full-width light bar adds more of that presence, while you get more discreet badging and redone bumpers. Now the MG Hector's engine lineup has now been streamlined, so you still get that multi-jet diesel with its 170 horsepower. But the petrol engine option is only one now, which is what we're driving today, with 143 PS and 250 Newton meter, and that pairs with a 6-speed manual like the diesel. But with the petrol you also get a CVT now, which replaces the DCT that was there earlier. And yeah, so the driving experience is familiar, but some things have changed. To start with, what hasn't changed is the view out. So you sit quite high up, as you would like in an SUV such as this one. You can see clearly the edges of the bonnet. The windows are large, as is the wing mirror, so visibility is great. Now the seats, they are not bad. For example, there's good support sideways. It's not great, but at least it's decent. And the ventilated seat function helps, of course. But what you would like, or at least what we feel, there could have been slightly flatter cushioning. The lumbar is a bit too aggressive for us. But other than that, as a car for doing long distances in, the Hector should be fine. Now coming to the driving experience, MG has thrown a ton of sound deadening to it. So at speeds like this, say below 2000 RPM, what you would usually do in the city, it's whisper quiet. It really is quite refined, the engine at these speeds. You barely notice it working, which is great. Although its earlier trait of not having too much performance lower down in the power band, that still continues. So if you want to make, say, a parking maneuver or just keep crawling in traffic, it's not quite as seamless as we would like. And to be honest, the CVT does seem to sap a bit of power from the engine. It doesn't quite feel that 143 PS worth of punch. You don't quite feel that punch. But that's not a very big problem, because what is there is still quite adequate for most of your needs. As you can see, once you've built up momentum, progress is quite easy. The CVT works quite well and really does the job of a CVT really well. So at these speeds, there's barely any of that rubber band effect, that so-called rubber band effect. So progress is seamless in the way only a CVT can make it. And then when you do, say, jab on the throttle, as you might want to sometimes for an overtake, there is some of that drone, but it's also accompanied by forward motion. So it's not all that disconcerting. The larger wheels have added a slightly firm edge to the ride, but it's well cushioned over small undulations. We would have liked to have seen some of the springiness over speed breakers or bigger bumps reduced though. Plus, over and above this, you get an eco mode, which does its usual bits of dulling down throttle response. And to be honest, even in this eco mode, the Hector is perfectly usable. It doesn't seem too hampered by it. Now there's also an S mode for the CVT gearbox, which you might find to be quite useful, say on a highway or when you're trying to make an overtake. Here it sort of unshackles the engine, so to speak. It's a bit more alert, as you can see now, to inputs. The rubber band effect is slightly diluted. That sort of drone is matched with even more progress than earlier. So in that sense, the Hector with this CVT powertrain is really quite a useful car. There's power throughout the rev band once you've got past that initial sort of sluggishness. So as a car to drive you around in the city, the Hector really does the job, even in this petrol. Guys, yes, the fuel economy could have been better, but other than that, in terms of checking boxes, the Hector really does it reasonably well. The Hector remains a competent handler for an SUV with well-judged steering heft and well-controlled body movements. It remains quite predictable around bends and there's good control at highway speeds too. Now quite a bit has changed on the inside of the MG Hector Facelift. Yeah, the steering wheel is more or less the same. It's still that nice grippy one to hold. There are a few more buttons for the added features, but other than that, it remains the same. But what you really notice first is this dash design. It's really quite premium with these soft surfaces and these gloss black and silver finished panels, and it really does give it quite a premium touch. But having said that, as you come lower down, you notice that some of the panel gaps here could have been tighter, than at least not as consistent as the ones on the top, for example here and here. And this central tunnel, again, it's very well laid out, quite logically laid out, but some of the buttons and the finishes around here, around the gear lever, could have been better thought out. This slight mishmash continues when you see the small fiddly Type A charge ports, while the door panels and the upholstery are finished in good quality soft leather. A thoughtful touch is the padding along the central tunnel, which cushions your knee. Yes, this off-white shade will take some maintaining, but it does add to the Hector's sense of space. But the big highlight which you can't miss at all is this massive new 14-inch touchscreen. Is the largest that you can find in any mainstream car in India. And it's definitely quite an improvement over the similar portrait screen that the pre-facelift Hector had. For example, the menus, they are far more logical, so it's much easier to access vehicle functions like this. For example, like the sunroof and the ambient lighting and so on. And the touch responses too, and the general fluidity of the screen has also improved. So it just makes the experience all that easier. Another great touch is this Android Auto integration. It integrates into the full screen, same with Apple CarPlay. It's also wireless, so it's really quite easy to use. Having said that, some of the drawbacks from earlier haven't been addressed. For example, the climate controls are still accessed through the screen, which isn't all that great on the move. For example, if I have to change any of the fan speeds or the climate, it's through the screen. But now MG has also removed the audio control, so that's made things a touch more difficult in that sense also. You have some capacitive buttons down below to control the volume, but really that's not enough. So that is something MG could have thought of. Maybe a small panel of physical buttons here would have been a great touch. Having said that, you do get these toggle switches down below for the new ventilated seats, as well as a max AC button, which is quite useful in our hot weather. So yeah, it's a mix of some gimmicks, some really useful additions. So yeah, overall, but this 14-inch screen, it really does add to the whole experience. There's a new 7-inch digital instrument cluster too. It's easier to read than the previous analog dials and displays information logically. It could have been brighter though, and there doesn't seem to be an efficiency readout for some reason. Now a quick word on the automatic indicators that the Hector has. So it's useful in certain situations, and in certain situations you'll find that it just keeps switching on and off when you don't need it. It could have been done a bit more intuitively, we don't know how, but say for example on a highway such as this, or a large road in the city where you might need to indicate often, it's not exactly working. It does work at intersections and tighter turns, but you also might find that when you're maneuvering the car, it'll keep switching on and off. So yeah, it's a good idea, and it's the first time that we've seen it, so we'll give MG points for that, but maybe it can be fine-tuned further. Among other feature highlights, there is now ambient lighting, wireless charging, more connected tech features and apps. There's also powered front seats, auto headlamps, tilt telescopic steering adjustment, the 8-speaker Infinity audio system, and the panoramic sunroof. So aside from automatic wipers, you are more or less covered. Now the back seat was one of the bigger positives of the Hector, so MG hasn't really messed with this space all that much. Yeah, the events here now, they sort of mimic the one in the front with the similar silver and gloss black detailing. But as you can see, that USB port is still this quite fiddly small Type A one. There could have been another one, considering at least 2 people will travel in it more often than not, in this bench at least. But moving on from there, it's a wide bench, so 3 adults over here will fit quite easily. There's even a 3-pointed seat belt, so the third passenger isn't compromised in terms of safety. As always, there's a massive amount of knee and leg room. As you can see, you can even put your feet under the front seat, so no problem in that sense. But like before, the under thigh support could have been better. It's not uncomfortable, but you still sit in a slightly knees up position, which can get slightly tiring over a long distance. It's a small nitpick, but it's something that you notice considering how well appointed the rest of the back seat is. And on that note, we also would have liked maybe a sunshade. The MG Hector is now really well loaded, so that is something that would have helped the Hector stand out in this very crowded segment. But you do get reclining seats, which is always a good help. It reclines to a nice angle. It's not very easy to use, but you do recline to quite a comfortable angle. The higher resolution screen has also improved the 360-degree camera's feed, although the graphics could have been less laggy still. Passive safety equipment includes 6 airbags, electronic stability control, hill hold, hill descent control and all 4 disc brakes. Now, major new addition with the MG Hector facelift is that it now gets level 2 ADAS, same as the Aster. And to be fair, it works in much the same way as in the Aster, so it's a fairly useful system. You can't rely on it completely as with most of these systems, but it does make life easier. So for example, it will find markings easily. For example, just now when we crossed that intersection, it didn't know where the markings were, but it catches on to markings easily enough. And there's a pretty useful graphic which shows you what the car is seeing. So you have small cutouts of the car or the bike that's in front of you, so it knows what's where exactly. And yeah, the functions are much the same. So on a slight curve such as the one we're on right now, you'll notice that it'll put in steering input, but a tighter turn you will have to take manual control. And we're at about 50 kmph, it manages the speed as you would want it to. There's no surprises over there. And while we can't mimic that all the time, when it does spot an obstacle, it does also brake or slow down quite easily. For example, if I reduce the speed, you notice that it slows down quite naturally. I've just gone down from 50 to 40. It's doing it naturally. It'll cut out when it doesn't see markings, but again quickly come back on also. Now the Hector also has a traffic jam assist function. It's pretty much the adaptive cruise control, just slightly tuned to work in traffic. So it will spot the car ahead in front of you at speeds over 10 kmph and accelerate or decelerate. Again, like the rest of the system, you can't rely on it entirely. You will need to be quite vigilant. So in that sense, the level 2 ADAS function in the Hector does do its job. It does make driving in traffic or on the highway easier. With this facelift, MG seems to have worked on maximizing the Hector's strengths. So the added presence, the better tech, ADAS and the improved driving experience all largely work. We would have liked some of the previous niggles to the ride to have been addressed, but the Hector still remains a strong choice if you're looking for a family SUV, especially since prices start from Rs 14.73 lakh and go up to Rs 21.73 lakh.